Susan Smith, and my report's on William Bagley. William Bagley was born March 14th, 1874. He was born in Michigan. Right after he graduated high school, he went to college at the Michigan Agricultural College, and he studied scientific agriculture. The reason we don't know him for that, and we know him for education, is because right after he graduated with his bachelor's, he had nothing to do because there's no jobs in it. He had no land, no money, and so he kind of got a degree with no job. So he pretty much looked around for a job, and he found one in a little rural town near where he lived, and it was a teaching job. He decided to do it, and about a year in, he decided to go to college to get a master's in education and learning model, I guess, learning model. He decided to do this because I guess he loved teaching so much in that year. He's ended up about halfway through his master's degree, transferring to University of Wisconsin-Madison. And once he got his master's, he actually got a Sage Fellowship to go to Cornell University to get his PhD. That's pretty awesome. When he was there, his mentor was a psychologist. He was a structured psychologist, actually. His name was Okay, I cannot say his name. It will be in the PowerPoint. You should see it to your other side. Yeah, so Mr. T, Professor T, he was this structured psychologist, which pretty much is the psychologist that believes in structure in all things, I guess. Structure in the way that our mind works. And obviously this influenced Bagley a lot because existentialism, you'll come to find, which you might already know actually, existentialism, probably should already know, is very much kind of a structure in education. So obviously he was really heavily influenced by his mentor, obviously it really influenced him, his ideals. And actually a year after he already got his PhD, for about a year afterward, he worked at the laboratory of that psychologist. So obviously they were good buds or something. Right after he got his PhD and right after, he left that laboratory, he ended up getting a job as a superintendent in a school in upper state New York. I guess he liked it, but about 2 years later, he got an offer to be professor of education at University of Illinois. Obviously, this is a lot more higher honor, more prestigious, and probably more money. So he accepted that. So he ended up going to there, and he ended up changing the whole curriculum. In fact, he changed it so much that within a few years, it became the top school to go for education, just because of all the changes he made. He stayed there for a long time. Compared to his other 1 and 2 years at other places, he stayed there a long time. And about 1917, he got an offer to study or to teach at Columbia, at the Teachers College. So obviously, he said yes to that. Columbia University and the University of Illinois. So he ended up going there. And the very interesting thing about that is that this is actually the same college that Dewey was at. Dewey, John Dewey, who was the head of, not the head, who was the main person you think of when you think of progressivism. The interesting thing about this and why it's so interesting that he went there, Bagley, is because Bagley was a strong proponent of structured education, and he'd actually written books that had gotten national attention about this subject before this. And so everyone knew this was what he liked. And Dewey, everyone already knew, was a progressive kind of guy who liked no structure. Well, not to say no structure, but he liked things to be more free and more, more interesting, more fun, more, I don't know. He liked things to be less structured when, obviously, Bagley was a very big structure kind of person. Obviously, they clashed heads. They did not get along so much. They ended up not getting along, and it was a very interesting time. I would have loved to have been there just to see the cat fights, but oh well. So Bagley, he actually made a lot of writings around this time, which I think is really interesting, because obviously these little butting of heads really got him to think a lot about his philosophies and had him write a lot of stuff. He actually ended up writing, he actually ended up being editor-in-chief of 2 different journals, Journal of the National Education Association and School and Society. So that's pretty interesting. Like, he was editor as well as an educator. Um, Also, he wrote a book in 1934, and its name I'm going to have to read off the paper because it's interesting. Education in Emergent Men, a theory of education with particular application to public education in the United States. That long sentence is pretty much existentialism. This book was all about existentialism. Of course, they didn't have the name existentialism then, I think. But it's pretty much all about having structure and having these core classes, kind of. Because he really believed in the fact that we need classic kind of classes. We needed to learn classic things like math and science before we ever go into more, fun classes like arts and things, which obviously was very, very opposite of what John Dewey and the Progressive believed. At 1938 is when the term existentialism, I guess, is used, and when it really becomes a movement with Bagley in the lead. So that's what his major contributions have been, existentialism pretty much, and the idea of that structure. How we see it today is very, 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 very obvious. If you think about it, it's really obvious. So just think about core classes, think about foundations. Yeah, foundation classes are pretty much the legacy of this guy, Bagley. He believed in us having those structured classes, those core classes. So thanks to him, you have to take Math 108 or Science Foundations or whatever. Whatever class you don't like that's one of the foundations classes, he's the reason. So you can blame him. He's also to blame for the requirements for graduating high school. He had the whole idea of making sure there were certain subjects we had to take to be able to pass and get out of high school. So you have him to blame for that. You also have him to blame for standardized testing, because he was a big proponent of that, and having that's pretty, existentialism really loves that standardized testing stuff. So there you go. You have like 3 things to blame this guy for. Aren't you lucky? That's what I've learned about William Bagley. William Bagley's a really interesting guy. There's a lot more stuff that I wish I could have put in this, but it would have taken 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So that is all, and I thank you so much for listening.